We are living out the unlived lives of our mothers because they were not able to become the unique people they were born to be. Gloria Steinem. I imagine Emilia Hart stomping her foot down and exclaiming, "That's it. I have seen enough," as she sat down to write Weyward. It is a raw account of the trials and tribulations of a woman whom we have all encountered, if we are not her ourselves. It is the interwoven story of the maiden Violets, the mother Kates, and the crone Alpha, and how these archetypes weave themselves into our journey. It is a story of hope for women hoping to pass on brighter futures to the daughters that come next, the ones who will hopefully banish the patriarchal forces that have left us handcuffed for centuries. It is a story of revolts and finding the strength to say no. The central theme in this novel revolves around the power of women and the forces that attempt to sequester our intuition and strength. Weyward paints a vivid portrait of the dilution of our intuition as we stray from our destined and authentic path. I see a lot of myself reflected within this novel, as well as the women who had come before me. I see my mother and her attempts to break free from the men who have bound her. There is a reflection of my grandmother, who had been taken advantage of and forced to relinquish her childhood innocence to a man who did not care for her. I feel their fights and bleeding between the very pages of this book. The echoes of my grandmother croon to me, "Just because you love someone does not mean they are right for you." A damselfly takes rest on my kneecap in quiet confirmation as I cozy myself into this novel. Mother knows best. A mother always knows. The mother figures within the novel pointedly knew in their hearts that their daughters were reliving their own battles. There have been several experiences within my lifetime where I found myself tracing my own forewarned mother's steps, for when I look in the mirror, I sometimes see her face looking back at me. Perhaps that is why my father looks back at me distantly from time to time, just as Violet's father had. I, too, grew up in the abandon of my mother's shadow, which had left a father so much unlike myself to raise me. Yet, just as in this novel, my mother had instinctually known before I did. I had once shown her a photo of a man that I was interested in, which was met with an animalistic hiss like I had never known before. But I pursued this man for 10 more years and allowed him to lazily slip a diamond ring on my finger. Luckily, for both of us, I got out before it was too late. Before I started wading down the path of the familiar, I was gifted with the opportunity to pivot and trek into the unknown, away from the patterns of my mother, and make a name for myself instead. I decided to choose a different life for myself, just as Kate had. Weyward contemplates how we can break the vicious cycles of abuse that have been handed down to us. It begs the question of which women in a given lineage can end the perpetuation of vicious violence from men. Our strength is found within ourselves and in the hearts of other women, not within the security and arms of our so-called saviors, as our fairy tales had led us to believe. We are called to discern fact from fiction. In recent years, I have found myself growing weary of romantic encounters that are all-consuming as if out of a storybook. Hart touches on the dizzying effect of these romantic pursuits in several plot lines, which has led me to contemplate my most impactful romantic moments. The ones where you recognize one another from across the room and the world fades away. These moments do not only belong in fairy tales, they are real and they happen, but they are dangerous. We can find ourselves idealizing these beautiful moments and clinging onto them as we lose ourselves in an otherwise fruitless relationship. Sometimes we lose ourselves completely. I had spoken to a healer in Hawaii about the notion of losing oneself in a romantic relationship, and she had acknowledged how common it is. She urged me to leave breadcrumbs behind for myself in order to find my way back again. Breadcrumbs. How do I do that? She encouraged me to consistently journal, so when I get lost, which I have always seemed to do, then I can find my pieces back to myself. At the time of this conversation, I had been in the budding of a new relationship and was sure that this advice would not be applicable to me. Now, nearly 2 years later, I laugh and thank her for the wise advice. My hand will never stray far from paper ever again. We found Alpha doing the same thing within the novel, chronicling her life and preserving it for generations to come. Violet sought out the truth and the wisdom of her mother, and Alpha's writing fell into Kate's lap in perfect timing. We must always make a map to find our way back to ourselves. We hold strength in numbers as women, and we hold the key of endless opportunities in our modern-day hands. It is essential to utilize our voices in order to reach out to the hearts of other women. Alpha knew in her bones that she must write her story so that the women who come next had the guidance, the light, to navigate the darkness as she once had. This reiterated my thought of creating art for the younger versions of our infinite selves. Do not create art for the women that you believe yourself to be now, but for the woman you were before you had found your light, before you found your strength. Who was she? What did she need to hear? What lessons is she struggling to learn? Make art for her. Make art for them. Watch the unfurling happen as your work falls into the hands who need it the most. The connections between and among women are the most feared, the most problematic, and the most potentially transforming force on this planet. Adrienne Rich.